personal perspective, what happened to me, and it's like, okay, so we're working for a company, we're using open source tools, we're using our intellect to create some tools, and then it's like, oh, you cannot share them. Why? I mean, I'm using open source. It's an idea that I took from an article. I am just writing the code to do it. So why can I not share? Why do we have to treat it so secretly?
Hi everyone, welcome to DataBasic. For episode today, we had the honor of hosting the remarkable Soledad Galli. She's a leading data scientist and has a number of years of work experience working across different organizations and institutions such as UCL. She's also a leading data science instructor and has trained over 50,000 students in the space of data science and feature engineering, and is the creator of the incredible Python package, Feature Engineer. So stay tuned into this incredible conversation as we talk about data science and AI. Hi, Sole. Welcome to DataBasic, the Warwick Data Science Society podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be part of our podcast today. Both Alexandro and I are extremely excited to host you. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here today.
Thank you.
Hello, yeah. Thank you.
I think we'd like to start by understanding a little bit about your career and how it progressed, because we've seen that you have incredible experience. You have a PhD, you have a postdoc, you have industry experience with a number of companies, and then you went on to start your own company. And you have over 50,000 students, you're an author. There is so much that you've achieved. I think we'd really like to understand your trajectory, and specifically, we'd like to understand what led you to start Train in Data.
Oh, sounds good. That's a lot to unpack. I studied biology as a background, and I went full on into science, biological science. I did a PhD in cancer research, and then from there I moved on to Germany, where I continued my studies. I learned some microscopy. Then I moved to London. So all in all, I did like a PhD and a postdoc. It was like 14 years in academia doing biological sciences. And then at some point, I made the decision to leave academia for various reasons. One is like small career progression opportunities after you've done several years of postdoc. And also academia is a little bit slow pace, and I wanted to try something different, something faster. And I had to think very carefully what I really liked doing, because there wasn't an obvious path for me. Like I knew that I didn't want to go to a pharmaceutical, which is kind of the obvious step for biologists. So I kind of took a look at what I liked, and I knew that I liked data analysis. I liked making hypotheses, analyzing data, drawing conclusions. And it was at the time that data science was kind of taking off. And I found on LinkedIn that a lot of my scientific colleagues were actually becoming data scientists. So I contacted a couple of them. I asked them how they done it. They recommended online courses. And I was like, this is not going to work. I mean, I've studied 5 years in university, 4 years PhD, and you're telling me that with an online course, I'm becoming a data scientist. So I was very skeptical. But I took the course because, you know.
When was that happening? Like, just to have a context.
2015.
Okay.
Yes, 2015. So I took a couple of courses. I started learning how to program. I knew a little bit of MATLAB from uni, but really beyond basic. I mean, I had to learn everything from loops to commands and logic and stuff. So that was it. Like I started learning online. I started applying to jobs. I was doing okay. And then I landed my first job. And then from there on, it kind of went uphill. I mean, once you convince someone that you can do data science, then it's much easier to convince the second one that you can be useful for them. So that was it. But then there was, like once I get into a job, I kind of hit a wall. I was like, okay, online courses are good, useful to understand the basics and to answer interview questions. But then when you're there, when you have to actually carry out a project, I felt that there was a lot more that I needed to learn. And then you start looking, and back then, we're talking 2016, there wasn't a lot of resources about consolidated best practices. I think there still are not that many. I mean, it's growing, the field is growing. But I think we still have a lot of work to do into consolidating best practices for machine learning data science. So I thought, okay, how about I make a course to consolidate some best practices? Because I spent so much time trying to understand how to pre-process data, for example, how to select variables. So I created the first course a little bit as a hobby, and it went actually really well. I mean, people were kind of very appreciative of the resource because I guess we were all struggling with the same thing. So then I was motivated to create the second course, and all along I was still working in finance and insurance. And then at some point, when I created the third and the fourth course, I noticed that I could actually
Make a living.
full time.
Yeah.
Yes, this is how I became, an instructor now.
That's quite interesting. Like, and when you're starting the courses, how did you share them first? Because I think whenever you start a project, the first couple of, I don't know, clients or users or whatever, they're harder to attract. And I'm curious now that you mentioned that because you got good feedback. But how were you distributing and sharing about your courses? Like, where was the
Yes.
platform? And yeah.
The first course, I put my first course on Udemy because in 2016, it was the only platform that allowed professionals to put courses. If the other platforms like Coursera and EDX, the courses need to come, or at least back then needed to come from an organization like a university mostly. And Udemy was having a different business business approach. They were basically asking professionals to teach professional skills, mostly from a practical perspective. So I put the course there, and basically they already had the audience the same way I took Python courses on Udemy. There was a lot of people. So basically Udemy did the job for me. Like no one knew me, but they have like the system of reviews. The students can rate the courses and so on. So that's how it was. And of course, my first course was actually, like when I compare it to the courses that I have today, was like really poor. I mean, it was just notebooks, and I was reading the notebooks and so on. I put a lot of effort in trying to explain everything scientifically. And the good thing is that students, they appreciate the effort and they give constructive feedback. It's like, oh, please don't read the notebooks. We love visuals. So then I said, yeah, makes sense. So then I started creating visuals and so on. And so like it was a learning progress where basically my courses became better, and hopefully they will continue to become better as I go along.
And if I may, just to wrap up this careers perspective, I noticed that you started your postdoc in Buenos Aires. Is that your hometown or your home country?
Yes.
Like Argentina?
Yes, I'm Argentinian.
Okay, so and then because you've been to the UK, there are lots of people that are coming from other countries, and most of our students are actually, I know for a fact, more than 50% of our students at Warwick are internationals. So I think it's quite relevant for us to understand how you like what motivated you to leave the country, and how did you find out? Because I've noticed that you've done some years at UCL in London. Like how did you find the transition, and how did you choose that university in particular, for example?
Yes. Why? Okay. So my motivation to leave, there's always more than one motivation or one reason. First, Argentina does science on a budget. So and it's also like you have more opportunity if you want, or more money if you were doing research in a more developed country, or a richer country, I should say, like those in Europe or the United States or Canada. So that was one thing. Like I wanted to get a taste of how research is done in these places where resources are not a limitation. The second one is that they do recommend scientists to go abroad, at least to get some experience, to see how different people do things, and then hopefully come back. But well, unfortunately for Argentina, I didn't come back. So that was one motivation. Then I was also like very curious to get to know other cultures, to like improve how I speak English. And yeah, I guess that was another motivation. Then my first experience was in Göttingen, which is a very small town in Germany. And that was like a massive shock for me, because I come from a very big city. Buenos Aires is huge, and like a third of the Argentinian population is in Buenos Aires and Greater Buenos Aires, more or less, and it's plenty of stuff to do. So it was a bit of a shock, because Göttingen is so small and there's like nothing to do. And I was very young back then, so I wanted to do stuff. So yes, I didn't have the greatest time, like around work. I mean, work was okay, but like, outside work, it wasn't great. So I came back to Argentina, and then I said, okay, I'm going to try again, but this time it has to be a big city. So I narrowed down to 3 choices, which was London, Berlin, or Paris. And I managed to get a position in London. So that was how I ended up in UCL.
That's heartwarming, and I'm glad that you managed to pass your struggles and find a place that you enjoy and you like. Just quick one, because I realized your native language would be Spanish, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So do you? Because I know English is a really common language, is one of the most spoken around the world, but Spanish is as well. Are you considering doing your courses in Spanish as well? Are you already doing it?
It's a hard one for me to answer. Like I'd love to make them in Spanish, because like I have like ties to the Spanish community. But like I speak with several Spanish-speaking people, like including, for example, my brother, who is a software developer, and what they tell me is that for programming, like most of the documentation is in English. Programming languages are in English, and even themselves, when they are in Argentina, they do search for stuff in English in search engines. So they have to know some English. So like I kind of decided that people know enough English to understand these courses as well. And I also did some surveys among my students, and like I'm asking them if they want to switch into Spanish, or if they want Spanish subtitles. And the great majority say no. So I kind of need to make a decision, like, do I make more courses in English, or do I stop and translate those into Spanish? And I think I could have a greater impact if I make more courses in English than if I just translate them to Spanish. So yeah, the same. No, it's a hard decision, but
yeah, no, that makes sense, especially that it's a data-driven one. You collected feedback and saw the opportunity. All right, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
I just had one quick question. Did it ever cross your mind to maybe integrate courses with all of these other platforms that are there? So for example, Coursera and 365 Data Science and these other platforms, or did you always want to start your own company and, build training data and have a space of your own?
Yes, own company sounds like super cool. It's not a company, it's just a brand. Like it's mostly myself, and I associate with other former colleagues. It's a project. There is not really a company, as in the legal sense. There are some strings attached. Like, for example, my courses are in Udemy for Business, and they require exclusivity. So that basically doesn't allow me to have it in other platforms other than my own. And like, a lot of the other companies approach me to ask me to have the courses or to make a course. And so far I have said no. The main reason is that Udemy is the biggest, so it's the one that has the widest reach. So I don't see why I should move to another one.
No, that makes sense. And if you allow us, maybe we could go into a bit more data science-y topics. I know you're like, when I first opened your LinkedIn page, I saw that you had a post about libraries, which I think we haven't really talked about during this podcast, unfortunately. So I think it would be really nice if you could maybe, I don't know, firstly, tell us what's a library and why is it useful in Python. And secondly, maybe to talk a bit about your favorite and the ones that you think are the most useful for somebody that starts learning data science and is using it in a project.
Yes, sounds good. So a library is kind of a little piece of software that lives within the Python ecosystem that basically allows people to do something very specific, and how specific it is, it kind of depends with the library. Like, for example, NumPy was designed to allow people to carry matrix operations in Python. Pandas was designed to allow people to work in Python as if they were working a little bit in Excel. So like you see the table, you understand, it's visual, it's crystal clear, it's what we're used to. But you couldn't do it straight away in Python. But Pandas offers that interface, so to say. Scikit-learn was born to allow us to do machine learning. No one basically, well, maybe no one is too exaggerated, but the great majority of us do not code the gradient boosted machine. We just take it from these libraries. And these libraries basically write all the software that you need, for example, to train a gradient boosted machine. So that we users just do it in 2 lines of code. Like we call the machine, we just fit it, and then we predict. So that's what a library is. And there are some that are my favorite, and there are some that you cannot do without today. Like, for example, NumPy, Pandas, Scikit-learn, SciPyStats. Those are libraries that they are here to stay because they offer all the functionality that you need for data science. And then throughout the last 4 to 5 years, there's been a huge boom of libraries that basically tackle one aspect or one new tool that became really popular and really useful. For example, SHAP, that allows you to interpret models with Shapley values, or well, Lime also is a little bit smaller because that one just implements Lime, or Feature Engine, which is the one that I created that basically expands beyond the tools available in Scikit-learn to pre-process data. And another one that I really like is Imbalance Learn, which basically gathers together all the tools that you can use to work with imbalanced data for oversampling and undersampling. So that is a library. And what I find super cool is that, okay, so you have massive projects like NumPy, Pandas, and Scikit-learn that are funded sometimes by universities, and there is a team of developers that you will think that is huge, but it's not huge. It's like 5 people, maybe 10 people, and they can take care of such a massive ecosystem. And then you have smaller libraries like Feature Engine or Imbalance Learn or SHAP that is usually 1, maybe 2 people behind them. And like they are so popular. So like, I don't know, it's like great. Open source, I find that is great. And it's unbelievable what 1 or 2 people, the impact that they can have.
No, that's true. In the fact that I'm not sure if you heard about it. Warwick has a group that's it's somewhere between research and industry, WMG, Warwick Manufacturing Group, and I'm working for them for doing the summer. And the project I'm in, they're actually helping developing PyBAM, or it's a library for battery data, and I'm saying this because I wanted to ask. It's an open source project. Everybody can work on it. Everybody can recommend and do changes and I don't know, pinpoint some things that are not going wrong. But then I heard that some universities are taking this open source project and then enclosing it within their university and doing stuff that they don't really discuss about outside of their community. And I was wondering if it happened with the library that you developed, and how are you feeling about this, taking something that's open sourced, helpful, and then enclosing it for your own purpose and for own advantage?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah.
Well, on one hand, I think it's I don't know, it's kind of a difficult topic, right? Because the whole point of open source is to make tools available to everybody, or like they like saying it's democratizing technology. And I think that's a cool thing, because then the software is up there and you can scrutinize it if you want it, and it can reach everybody, not just the people who have the money, but also, you know, people that can use it perhaps in countries that are not as rich as the ones that we're familiar with. So I think it's amazing. Then a company can take a piece of software and add stuff on top, and they call it intellectual property.
Yeah.
Yes, it happens a lot. I mean, I don't know what to say about it. I mean, sometimes, I don't know, like if, yes, I don't know. It's a hard one because you call it.
It's difficult, yeah.
Yes, I mean, if you build the credit risk on top of that, I mean, you're not going to expose your credit risk because the whole point of the model, I don't know, like everybody can take your credit, is competition issues. Yes, I don't know. I don't really know what to say.
Yeah, no, it's a fact because I know the wider data science and machine learning communities. I know there's a huge hype around OpenAI and what they did, but if we look at the basis, they actually took an open source thing, transformers, which were developed by Google, and open source for that particular reason to be developed further and improved. And now they are making money and claiming that, okay, this is all their thing. And then they didn't make their paper public. So that's another thing that people are quite skeptical and they don't appreciate. But still, it happens and it will happen going forward.
Yes, it's a very interesting topic. I mean, unfortunately, I don't know enough. Like from a personal perspective, what happened to me, and it's like, okay, so we're working for a company, we're using open source tools, we're using our intellect to create some tools, and then it's like, oh, you cannot share them. Why? I mean, I'm using open source. It's an idea that I took from an article. I am just writing the code to do it. So why can I not share? Why do we have to treat it so secretly? It just annoyed me a little bit. And that also kind of was a motivation to create Feature Engine. I mean, like I've learned a lot working at these companies because of my own research.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's I don't know, I cannot share it. I don't know. It's a bit frustrating as a professional. But I would like to hear more about the other side other than, oh, the competition. You know, that just sounds so stupid.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think my next question would be just taking you back a little bit in your career. From your experience in credit risk, if you could tell us a little bit about how machine learning models are, designed or built for things like insurance claims or fraud prevention. What does that machine learning development process look like? If you could give us an example.
Yes, I think it more or less looks like the great majority of machine learning projects. So the first step is you need to gather the data, and you need to make sure that the data that you gather is basically is representative of the population that you're going to serve with your models. That's key. And in credit risk, basically, particularly in the UK, but I think it's in all developed countries, you have credit agencies that they take care of gathering data from financial institutions. So basically, you kind of buy data from them as the financial institutions. So that's how you gather the data. Then you combine it with the data that you gather from the people when they apply for a form. They need to, for a loan, they need to basically put some data into the form, and with that you enrich the data that you get from the credit agencies. And then the process is pretty straightforward. And I think you basically need to preprocess that data to transform those variables in something that the model can understand. You need to understand the data, understand the variables, kind of try and see which of the variables are predictive, which ones make sense, which ones you are allowed to use, given certain regulations that regulate your industry. So you can use a variety of feature engineering techniques, feature selection, then you train your machine learning model, you evaluate it. And the good thing about at least our company is that you evaluate the model really well. I mean, it's not just the performance metric that improves the former model, but like also how the model affects different sectors, like the wealthiest sector or perhaps the poorest sector that you're serving, so that basically you have a clear understanding of how your model is going to affect people. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, agreed, that does. And just trying to understand from the model interpretability perspective, have you ever encountered situations where, there are certain black box techniques within data science that that organizations might not want to be leveraged because of the issue of interpretability? So have you ever encountered that, or, is the regulation strict on the kind of methodologies that you can leverage for data science, especially when it comes to credit risk?
No, the regulation doesn't tell you which tool you can use. The regulation tells you that people have the right to understand why you made a certain decision. So if someone applies for a loan and you reject the loan, the person has the right to say, hey, why did you reject the loan? And then you need to be able to provide an answer. And the answer is not because my model said no, but you need to be something. You need to give them something that they can understand and they can make sense. Like, for example, well, we noticed that you have unpaid debt in the last 3 months, or we only give loans to people that have a disposable income and so on. So I don't know, like I'm inventing here, but it has to be, it cannot say because you lived in Chelsea, that's not okay. So you need to be able to give them that information because they need to understand why, so they can actually do something to improve their credit score if that's a problem. And if they think that you reject them and it was not fair, then they can dispute it. So that's what the regulation basically tries to ensure. And then how you do that from the company is by using what are called interpretable machine learning models. And in finance and insurance, I mean, it's fairly straightforward because it's mostly classification or regression, and there are interpretable machine learning models for that, like logistic regression, linear regression, even random forest and gradient boosting machines. You can interpret all of those with the tools that we have today. So it's not a problem, I would say. You just need to make sure that you tick the boxes, you are sure that your variables make sense, and that you test it, and that your model can produce reasonable outputs from a human perspective. Yes, then there are other, I guess, there are organizations that are less regulated, and there are also situations where the gradient boosting machine is not going to resolve your problems. I don't know, like, I don't really know, but like, for example, I think about companies like Spotify or the companies that organize and optimize delivery, or, well, without going any further, social media network search engines, they use these what are called black box models. And a black box model can be black box because it is intrinsically black box, like a neural network, or it is black box because the company does not want to disclose what the model is doing. And there are a lot of problems with both approaches. I mean, there have been a lot of scandals about social media promoting disinformation, or leading to people's health problems because their algorithms promote things that they shouldn't be promoting for the well-being of people. And that's because they are optimizing for metrics that serves them for profit. And unfortunately, there is not enough regulation that tells them what their algorithms can and cannot do. It's coming, hopefully, but it's not there yet. So that's one problem, that there are some sectors that need a little bit more regulation because it's not coming from themselves. And then there is the other problem is that sometimes you buy a model that was developed by a company and then you use it, but the company doesn't really tell you what the model is doing because it's intellectual property. Otherwise, the whole software loses value if you can't reproduce it. And that has also led to a lot of problems because then you find yourself using recruiting algorithms that reject people based on psychology tests, which in a lot of places is not legal. But because you don't know what the black box is doing, you just use it.
Wow.
Yes. So there are a lot of these interesting stories in the book Weapons of Mass Destruction from Cathy O'Neill. I think it was one of the first books that started reporting the damage that you can use with machine learning because of black box of the two types, the ones that you can interpret and the ones that they don't want to disclose, and how that affects different sectors of the population. And usually, almost always in the world that we live in, is the poor and the minorities.
That's so interesting. Like, we'll definitely put the link for the book in the description. But I really didn't know about this. And is there, because as you mentioned, they're not allowed to do that, but they still do it. Like, companies would buy the software, the machine learning algorithm that would do that without knowing that they do something that's illegal. And at this point, who's liable for for me not getting accepted into a university? Is it the company that produced the software? Is it the company that bought the software? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think all of that is a gray area, and
Okay.
the reason that why these things come to light are like very, is not clear. Like going back to one chapter of this book in particular. So what happened is that one student wanted to get a job and he's rejected once, twice, 3 times. And one time he's rejected from a company where he has a friend. So the friend is able to say, oh, the algorithm flagged you because of a psychology test. And I was like, what? You're judging me on a psychology test. And good for him, his father was a lawyer. So then they started going back and forth with the company and the ones that rejected them. And then from there, they go to the black box. The company says, no, I cannot disclose because it's black box. So after a lot of back and forth with a card in the middle, you get to the end of the story. But until you get to that point, I mean, you're already being rejected from everywhere, you and a whole lot of other people. So I don't know if this answers the question. So I think it's not clear because I think it's new. So the regulation is hopefully coming, but slow.
And did they, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but did they win the process? Like, are you, like, realistically, what's the chances if you suspect that something is happening like this and you go on to a court with it?
I don't remember the outcome of that particular. Yes, I don't remember, but I think what these things are gaining more and more is attention. And once you go through something like this, then you have the company saying, whoa, maybe we don't need to use this algorithm, or maybe I need to know what's going on. And then at the back of that, regulators and politicians start talking about it. I don't think that you get the company to hire you. Also, like, do you really want that to work for a company that you just sued? I don't know. I think, yes. I don't know. I've answered vaguely, but I think
about biology and biochemistry. If you could tell us a little bit about the crossovers between data science and biology, if you could give us a couple of examples or just your experience in that space.
So my personal experience is like I worked with cells and in vitro experiments. So you don't have big data, you have small data, and that you can resolve with a very, I call it simple statistical tests that have been decided at least a century ago. So that's one thing. Having said this, those tests are in various cases the root of the later on machine learning models, particularly regression. But also many feature selection techniques. So for going a little bit bigger in data science, in biology, and when you do genetic screening, for example, that you screen thousands and thousands of genes. For that, I am aware that you also use statistical tests because they are fast, and then you basically correct the p-value to avoid the error. So I haven't worked myself, but I guess the most exciting part that is the closest to machine learning is about molecule modeling and understanding the structures of molecules and proteins and things like that. Yeah, but I don't have first-hand experience on big data in biology.
And realistically, I think it's just a handful of companies that have, because probably it requires a lot of computational power and also resources to allocate. I know AstraZeneca and Google are like working in this protein folding field with some AI, like, which is quite powerful. Like it solved the problem that was 70 years old, I think. Like it was a data set of proteins that they didn't manage to properly see how they're unfolding and how they're behaving. But now it's solved, and then now they're trying to, like, these pharmaceutical companies are now trying to take these AI models and develop some drugs to tackle cancer and other really important problems nowadays that are still are starting to be solved easily, and it's something that we have some cures. We know that okay, it's better and better, but still there's no drastical improvement of okay, if you have cancer you won't die, and unfortunately it's something that's still affecting millions and millions of people. But yeah.
Yes. Yes, like I've heard of some applications, but more from the like not like things explicitly like how can we improve some aspect of health, but for example, how can we improve doctors find what they need faster? Because before there were like so many things that you could do with someone who has a disease, but now there's so much research out there. So they are using NLP, natural language processing, to try and swim faster through the vast literature and kind of put in front of the doctor the most relevant. So that's one application that is basically helping doctors do better their job. It's not intrinsically biology, but it's close enough perhaps. And then the other one that I'm not a great fan of, but in the right hands it could be a good tool, is given some history that you have, what are you more likely to be sick of, so to say, and then what can you do to prevent it. So that one could be a great tool because it could help people, particularly those with a predisposition to something, to do something about it. But it's also a very dangerous tool because in the wrong hands, it can encourage people to charge you higher premiums if you're going to be sick.
Okay, yeah.
And that is a problem.
Oh, that's a good point from the insurance perspective as well, because now they could do a background check and see, oh, you might develop this, I will charge more. And
yes.
You're right, which is not as right. Because
yes.
while you're saying, I was like, oh, what's the problem with it? Because I know they're like, because genes are passed on, and like probably even more than me. So you need to be careful for some diseases if some members of the family had them. But yeah, now I've never thought about okay, some others might have access to this data and make a profit and charge more, and which is really bad. Like
yes, or reject you flat out. So we don't insure
yeah.
you because you're going to be sick. It's a waste of money for us as a company. It's very so AI has opened many doors, and like I'm pro that. But you just cannot use it like that. I mean, you need to be very careful as a professional when you develop the product, and also like the incentive that is driving that product. And unfortunately, it doesn't always come from the person, maybe because they don't understand it, and from the companies because they have other incentives that are priority, like profit. So if you don't have regulation, there is sadly no way of preventing this misuse of technology. So yeah.
This is actually going to be our next question, to just understand your thoughts on AI. And we've talked about having technology and tools in the right hands. So what are your thoughts on AI, especially ethical considerations around AI, the misuse of AI, and what do you see the future of it being, especially now that it's not in a space where it's regulated or even completely understood?
Yes, it's a very interesting question and debate. I mean, I think AI is going to help us improve various aspects of our lives, and there are examples like this one from health, for example, or like I don't know, like ChatGPT is also useful. Like I've used ChatGPT, like it helps you write better or more polite or friendly or more engaging responses, for example. That's particularly for native users. I don't know. So it has its uses, and it also has its risks. And I think the way we approach technology is more about developing the coolest thing first, because then I can monetize it. And it's all about monetizing technology, monetizing data. So that's the priority. That's what the conversation is about. And yes, you can monetize it, but it's going to have a knock-on effect on someone. It's almost always going to be one person, you, me. So we need to understand what the product is doing when you're going to put it out there. And that is not happening as much as it should be happening. And then we have all the consequences that we are seeing today. So one step is regulation. You cannot regulate what you don't understand. So, it has to be regulation about what the companies need to expose or make available for scrutiny. So I guess that's the thing. So where all of this is going, there are more regulations coming. I think the European Union is launching, I think if it's not this year, next year, something that strictly regulates how you can use your models. And the regulation says that if it's going to make a significant impact on the person, you need to be able to explain it. But significant impact is not good enough. So I'm hoping that they come with better explanation of what significant impact comes in. So it's happening. It's slow. It's a lot of people pushing for that, and then there's also a lot of lobby. Unfortunately, like the big tech companies spend fortunes lobbying politicians to basically try and deregulate or stop and put regulation, back into the future as much as possible. So that is also happening. So I don't know where it's all going. I wish I had the crystal ball, and I wish it had a happy ending, but I guess we'll see.
That's true. And I was wondering, do you know anybody, or are you in conversation with anybody that's in this field trying to regulate AI or trying to understand it and make it easily explainable? Okay, so what I'm trying to ask is, because I know I won't go in that direction, for example, because law is not something that, and regulations are not something that appeals me intrinsically. So I'm wondering, okay, if I'm not doing it, are there actually people there that are learning data science, using AI and having real experience with it, trying to make these changes, or they're just people from the social, like the social science perspective that understand this threat, but not really understand the technology? I'm not sure if it makes sense what I'm trying to.
Yes. There are groups, there are non-profit organizations that are basically taking this issue forward. Perhaps the most famous one is the Center for Humane Technology, that is led by Harris, the surname, and I forgot the name now, unfortunately. But Tristan Harris, there it comes. He's very popular. He worked in Google, so he understands the technology very well because he was designing the technology. He understands the risk. He understands the challenges. If I remember the story correctly, he tried to raise the alarm in Google. It didn't go very well, so he left Google and he starts this company. Sorry, that's not a company. It's a non-profit.
Yeah.
Yes, and the whole idea is basically to create awareness of how dangerous these tools are. And then he created the movie that maybe you have seen. It's The Social Dilemma. It's on Twitter. On Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So I would say that those are the main advocates for regulation, and they understand the technology well. I don't think they are lawyers, but they're probably in touch with lawyers as well. And the idea is basically to encourage politicians to do regulations. And then hopefully politicians are in contact with lawyers. I mean, there is a team of people working in creating the new regulations. So that's the one. Then we have the Algorithmic Watch League. And now I don't remember who was the founder, because so we have the book of Cathy O'Neill. I think she also working close with an NGO. And then we have another movie, Coded Bias, that was a PhD student from the MIT, if I remember correctly. She was working with face recognition algorithms, and the algorithm couldn't recognize her face because she was of color. And the algorithm is trained on white people. So she realized that because then she puts a white mask on her face, and then the algorithm worked. So from that, she started code the movie, and then there's also the algorithmic watch league. I think it's not, she has another league. So, but basically what I'm telling is individuals or group of individuals that were in close touch with the technology. They saw that they are not okay, or at least not always okay, and then they try to push for some regulation, mostly because when they talked with the companies, it didn't go the way they wanted, so to say. So yeah, it's groups of people that understand the technology and not, yeah, and they're probably in touch with lawyers, but they're not lawyers themselves.
No, that's good. That's good. That's what I was wondering, because I didn't really know much about this area, and I knew you'd have some answers. So thanks for that. It's a bit more reassuring now, and I feel like we're bringing some light to all the problems that we've been discussing so far. So it's at least there's someone out there and doing something.
Yes, there is someone out there, but it's not enough because, as I said, like the lobby is so big that basically these people like are outpowered because, you know, we live in a capitalistic world, and like lobby and money basically outweigh people and good ideas or ideas that are good for society a lot. So I think it's good that these groups exist, but also like we are developing the products. I mean, the people that work in Google is people like you and me. The people who work in any company is people like you and me. So like we can have a say in the products that we want to create and how they are going to be used. So I think it's also a little bit our responsibility to make sure that we create products that we understand and that are going to do good and not damage. Yes, so we have an individual responsibility as the creators of those products.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree, and because it definitely changed my mind a bit about how I approach this, because I knew it was important to understand how the model is working and how it's behaving. But honestly, I wasn't putting that much emphasis on that compared to how good it's performing and how well it's delivering out there. But definitely, you're right. Like it's in the end, it's an individual responsibility to make sure that we are doing more good than harm, and we are trying to reduce or remove all the harm together. Probably it's not possible in the end. There's always something bad there, but reducing it as much as possible. It's important. It's important. So yeah.
Yes, and this topic that you said, because like for me it was the same. Like when I started doing machine learning, I was like, oh, I need to get the best model, and they don't let me use XGB. They want to use logistic regression. No, they don't get it. No, they do get it. Maybe I am the one that is not getting it. But I think the problem there is like how we learn machine learning, because when we learn machine learning, it's about, oh, the algorithm does this and that to minimize the loss function, and this is how you evaluate it, and you need to make sure that the rocket you see is the biggest possible.
Yeah.
And that's it. So that's the mindset that then you take to work. And I'm yet to find, a machine learning course that talks about interpretability and talks about ethics and the damage that you can do. So you don't really see it at all until you actually decide almost to look for it actively. So I think that's a problem. I think we could put a little bit more of this in the basic data science and machine learning curriculums. I think it's not there yet.
No, I'll definitely bring it up whenever I have a course on machine learning. I'm curious to see how our lecturers will approach it and how open they'll be at this problem. Just a quick one regarding this, because usually whenever there's more regulation, innovation in a way is slowed down. At least that's how I perceive it. For example, in the financial industry, it's heavily regulated, and you rarely or not that often see big improvements or big changes in how they operate, which is a good thing because, as you mentioned, you need to make sure that somebody is not rejected to get a credit just because they're from Manchester or something else. But when it comes to machine learning, if all of us decided to, okay, we shouldn't use neural networks because it's harder to understand how they're behaving, or maybe there's a way of understanding it as well. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, how do you feel? How do you find that balance between, okay, I want to try something new that it's harder to understand or interpret, but I knew it can have a major impact, compared to, okay, I know linear regression is easy to follow, easy to understand. We know what's doing, but sometimes it's performing worse.
That's a very good question. And I wish I would have a clear-cut answer to that. I think
No, it's okay.
I think it varies depending on the field. Like if I have to think about finance and insurance, I mean, the data sets are very simple in comparison to other industries. So I don't see those industries going beyond gradient boosted machines. Maybe like when now that, I don't know, it's this thing that you can put this machine in your car to measure acceleration and stop. Maybe they can do something fancy with that, and you probably may need the neural network. I don't know. It's too green at early stages. But so I think there is not really a good reason why those companies need, black box technologies, given the things that they do. On the other companies that maybe do need black box machines, I think there are two things. I don't know. I guess I would think very carefully why was the reason why I am putting a model out there without sufficiently scrutinizing it. Is it because I want to make more money? In some cases, that is the answer. And then, regulation there is a good thing because it is risky and it's going to be just to make some people richer. So, I think regulation, yes, it may be slower, but I think it's a good way to encourage people to think more carefully and not put potentially destructive things out there. And then at the same time, so going back to the question, like, can you interpret a black box? There are some tools that help you interpret a black box. The thing with these tools is that they basically try to mimic the black box from a much simpler perspective that you can understand. Some are surrogate models, so that you would build a linear model to predict the black box, what the black box is predicting, but then it makes very simple approximations. It's no guarantee that it's telling you the truth. But having said this, there are other things independent of the black box that allows you to measure the consequences. And in the Facebook files, that was a scandal either last year or the year before, it was reported by the Washington Post. I mean, researchers in Facebook, now Meta, knew that their algorithm was causing damage to teenage girls in Instagram. So they knew, so they did that research. They did it too late because the algorithm had already been running for years. So, the research is happening already. So there is a way of, if you don't understand the black box, there is a way to measure the impact. It's just that then with that information, they did nothing until they had this whistleblower incident. And I don't know how they follow up on that, but it was a major scandal as well. So I don't know if, yes, as I said, like I don't have a clear-cut answer. I think it kind of depends. Some industries, they basically have no reason to use black boxes. The interpretable models are I offer everything that they need. And then for others that they need to use a black box, yes, the lack of regulation basically gives you free way to do whatever you want. And that's why they advocate for lack of regulation. But on that path, you can make a lot of damage. And are you going to be responsible enough to take care of that damage and try to minimize it? If yes, then we don't need regulation. Fine, let's avoid all regulation. You take care, you are responsible. But that is not happening. So that's the discussions. Like, yeah, regulation makes me slow. Okay, then be responsible. And if you're not responsible, then unfortunately, unfortunately, people are not responsible. Therefore, we need regulation. So yeah, I think that's the important thing. I don't know. It's not because when I hear people, and particularly the industry, basically, this is the discourse of the industry. Like, they make us slow, they don't let us progress. But then, look at yourself, and it's like, are you being responsible of the products that you use? Then you just need the regulation to basically to keep you on check. It's super sad that it has to be this way, unfortunately, but it looks like this is what it has to be. No,
thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
So one question we would have is around just understanding from your experience, the common challenges that you've seen students of data science face in their, learning or in their journey of just understanding concepts or implementing themselves. What are some common challenges that you faced, and how would you advise students to overcome them?
Common challenges is a good one. I think one common challenge, and this is probably a reality even today, maybe today less than before, is that there is perhaps no established well practice. So you learn a lot about, okay, this is a machine learning model, this is another one, this is how it works, this is how you evaluate the performance. But then with all this information, you land your first data set, and what do you do with that? Because it doesn't look like what they teach you in an online course, or potentially also not in the uni either. I mean, this is real, right? This is messy. And sometimes you're lucky and you work in a place where people know the domain very well, and sometimes in other companies, basically they're left to your own devices. So I think that's one of the challenges, to hit the road running. And what to do about it? I think the only thing that can prepare you well for this is to try and do as many projects as possible. So understanding the model is a good one, but then you need to basically do it yourself. And a good solution to that is to take open source data sets, particularly those available in data science competitions, because you are going to face the problems there already. Maybe the data sets are not as complex as the ones that you get in real life, but they are complex enough. So, like, for me personally, doing these type of competitions helped me answer a lot of the questions that I was having in interviews, because basically they are practical challenges that you will encounter in any project. So I think that one is like a good solution, to practice as much as possible, so that you faced the challenges already, and when the interview question comes, it doesn't take you by surprise, for example.
No, that's fair. That's fair. That's true, because I think I emphasize, like, I was in that situation after my first year. I did an internship, and the project was using NLP to try to predict, like, they had book drafts, and they're trying to predict if that book draft is worth going through. Like, how likely is that book draft to go best-selling, and so on and so forth, which indeed is hard to think. It's a hard thing to predict. There are so many variables to take into consideration, and I think they were over aiming with that project, because in the end, we didn't manage to do something meaningful. What we achieved was to be able to say what the topic of the draft is, so it's easier for the publisher to give it to an editor, which was specialized on that topic, and then like some sentiment analysis and some stuff like that. So it was very introductory things that were done in the end. And back then, it was literally my first project with data and trying to use machine learning, and it was really hard to. Okay, how am I approaching this? Like, okay, what's going on? What am I supposed to do from now on? So, like now, if I were to take a step back, what you said is quite valuable to try to do to take open source data sets and try to solve the challenges in order to prepare you ahead of various stuff and to be able to be in the mindset at least of how we should approach these projects, complex projects. And if you don't mind, probably this would be the last question. Coming back to the feature engine, the library that you've developed and you're working on. I know we've talked about the motivation. You wanted to do that because companies weren't allowing you to open source your ideas and your understandings and developments. But could you maybe tell us a bit how people could use it and or where it falls within the other libraries? Coming back to the discussion from the beginning. Because I do believe it might be something that might help me. So now I'm curious about it.
Yes. Feature Engine is a feature engineering library, and it tries to, it does mimic scikit-learn. So scikit-learn has the transformers that you feed, and then it learns parameters, and then you predict, and it predicts something. For example, a gradient boosted machine, but it also has transformers that help you transform data. For example, the scalars that will apply the min-max scaling, so scaling to the minimum and maximum, or scaling with the mean and the variance. Then you fit the transformer and it learns the mean and the standard deviation, and then you transform, and you can transform as many data sets as you want. So that's the idea of feature engine. You basically have a transformer that will learn some parameters that then allows you to transform data. And the most basic ones, perhaps, are those for imputation. When you have missing data in your data sets, some common imputation techniques are to impute with the mean, with the median, or with a value at the end of the distribution. So feature engine learns those values from the training set. It stores them, just like scikit-learn does, and then it allows you to transform future data. So whenever you have a data set with missing data, you apply dot transform, and it feeds the missing data. And so that would be for imputation, but then it has encoding when you have categorical variables like, I don't know, vehicle make or hair color. If someone would have hair color, something, you have like red, blue, white, and then you need to transform that into numbers. The most common procedure is one-hot encoding, that you derive dummy variables, but there are a lot more that you can do. For example, just replace by 1, 2, 3, or with the weight of the evidence is something that was used in finance a lot. Or yes, or basically replaced by numbers, but ordered by the mean. Anyhow, there's a lot of things that you can do that you need to learn parameters from the training data, and then you need to store them so that then you can use it in future data sets when you put your model in production or when you evaluate your model in the test set. So that's what feature engine is there for. If you can do most of that in pandas, you need to code it yourself. It's a lot of lines of code. So feature engine takes the work out of you because it already pre-packed the code in a transformer, so that when you do fit, it learns the parameters, and then when you do transform, it transforms the data. So basically, feature engine runs on top of pandas. It basically just takes the work out of your hands. Before you had to do it yourself manually, now you just do it with 3 lines of code. And you have transformations for imputation, encoding, discretization, applying mathematical transformations, combining variables, trimming outliers, feature selection. That's one of my favorites. Yes.
And because I saw a quite impressive number on your page, it was more than 130,000 monthly downloads. How do you cope with this followership and this? Because it is a fun base in the end. Like if this many people are using your library, it's something that's actually useful for them, right?
Yes. Yes, I was very happy when I discovered that I can actually measure the downloads. So there is a website, it's called pepi.tech, that you can enter any package and you can detect the downloads. And like I found that one randomly, and then I checked Feature Engine and I was like, wow, people are using it. It's like so cool. I didn't know that it was having that impact. And it was, I don't know, it just made my day. I think it made my entire year. Because yes, like I cannot explain how rewarding it is that you make a tool and people use it, even if you don't know about it. So it's like, yeah, like you said, super cool. It's yeah, very rewarding.
All right. I know I said that our audience is mainly composed by students and young professionals, but I think because of what we discussed, I would really kindly like to ask you if you'd have to say something to lecturers in the data science field, what would be your message? And with this, we could just finish the episodes.
Well, I think given that we've been talking about the ethical use of AI, and perhaps something that I would encourage more is to teach AI together with the power and the risk that it can have. So not just explaining what the gradient machine is and how to evaluate it, but also how you can use it, because then when you understand how you can use it, you begin to grasp first the power that it has and also the risk that it has. So it's like to just put the math in a real context and try to cover, you know, what goes beyond the math. That I think it's a little bit forgotten.
All right, so thanks so much for the episode, and it was a pleasure talking to you. And you heard her now do some more ethics around AI. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I think your journey is so incredible and so inspirational. And I think this episode, we've had so many wonderful takeaways. So thank you so much for accepting, to come on our podcast and sharing all these wonderful thoughts. I'm sure our students will have a lot of things that they can take away from it. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good day. See you too.
Thank you.